Plymouth, a small city on the southern coast of England. The year was 1978. Sea voyages were still a strange mixture of romance and fear. Modern technology had arrived, but the restless waves of the Atlantic, the mysterious fog, and the deep unknown still struck terror into the hearts of sailors. From that very city, a medium-sized passenger ship, the Arcadia Voyager, was about to begin its journey. The ship wasn't massive, but it was sturdy, built of steel with a 3-story structure, capable of carrying about 150 passengers and 40 crew members. Its main purpose was a week-long trip from Plymouth toward the Mediterranean Sea. Generally, it was a completely routine trip, carrying some businessmen, a few wealthy families, and several young adventurers. The captain was Edward Lawson, a man with nearly 25 years of experience, seasoned, but with a slightly odd disposition. His first mate was James Howard, younger in age but proficient in technical knowledge and modern navigation. Along with them were dozens of other sailors and mechanical engineers. Among the passengers, 3 were particularly noteworthy: Margaret Williams, a journalist who was preparing an article on the mysteries of the sea; Daniel Grant, a historian who had a collection of old maritime legends; Laura Conrad, a young artist who was traveling to paint seascapes. The first 2 days of the journey were perfectly normal. The sea was calm, the weather favorable. Passengers spent their time in laughter and leisure. At night, the sailors would sit on the deck, under a star-filled sky, singing songs. But on the dawn of the 3rd day, the situation began to change. A dense fog suddenly descended, so thick that it was impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Captain Lawson continued to navigate using his experience, but a strange thing happened. The radar screen suddenly went blank. It was as if there was nothing around them, no other ships, no floating objects. Nothing was being detected, and unease spread among the passengers. Some said it was probably just a technical glitch, but Margaret, the journalist, noticed a strange sound drifting through the fog. It was as if many people were whispering invitations from a distance. That very night, the first strange incident occurred. A sailor named Oliver Brown suddenly went missing. He was on watch duty in the middle of the night. The glow of his cigarette had been visible just minutes before, but when his colleagues went to look for him, there was no trace of him. There was only a single wet footprint in a corner of the deck, as if someone had climbed up from the sea. Captain Lawson had the entire ship searched. The passengers were awakened, but Oliver was nowhere to be found. The next morning, the fog grew even thicker. The compass suddenly began to point in the wrong direction. Strange problems appeared in the engine control. It was as if some unseen force was toying with their course. The historian, Daniel, then sat the passengers down in a corner and began to tell an old legend. It is said that there are parts of the sea where time and reality merge. The ships that enter those places never return. Centuries ago, a dozen ships supposedly vanished within this very fog. Listening to this, a shiver ran down Laura's spine. She had been painting continuously, but the color of the sea in her paintings was no longer ordinary. It had become shrouded in a strange darkness. By then, a single question haunted all their minds: was this fog merely natural, or had they truly entered an unknown region from which no ship ever returns? There was no sign of the morning fog lifting. One by one, the sailors reported from the deck that nothing was visibly. A wall of mist seemed to have surrounded the ship. The radar was completely inactive, and the compass had gone haywire. When pointed southwest, the needle would sometimes swing north, sometimes west. The lines of worry on Captain Lawson's forehead deepened. He had crossed the sea many times, but he had rarely encountered a situation like this. Still, he tried to remain strong in front of the passengers. "This is just a temporary problem, he announced. "We will be out of the fog soon." But the passengers weren't convinced. The journalist, Margaret, grew more frightened. She was documenting every event in her notebook: Oliver's disappearance, the wet footprint, the malfunctioning compass. Around noon, the engine suddenly shut down. The roaring ceased, leaving the ship floating in dead silence. The mechanical engineers rushed below. After several hours of effort, the engine started again, but everyone understood this was not a normal problem. That night, the second incident occurred. This time, a passenger went missing: a young businessman named Robert Fletcher. He was last seen in the dining hall. He had finished his meal and was heading to his cabin, but in the morning, his cabin was found empty. The bed sheets were untouched, and his luggage was intact. Only a piece of paper lay on the table, with a scrawled message written in a shady hand: "The sea is calling, I must go." But the handwriting was so unnatural that it looked as if it had been written by a trembling hand. An investigation revealed that the handwriting was not Robert's at all. This news spread panic throughout the ships. The passengers surrounded the captain. "Take us back. Something terrible is happening here. Why aren't you telling us what's really going on?" Captain Lawson tried his best to calm everyone down, but fear was building inside him as well. As the night deepened, something even more terrifying happened. Laura, the artist, who had been painting, suddenly let out a scream. Everyone rushed over to see her canvas, on which something strange was painted: a vast black shadow, its shape indistinct, looking like a monstrous figure lurking in the dark. Laura's hand was trembling. She said, "I didn't want to paint this, it just appeared before my eyes on its own." Daniel, the historian, stood silently. He then stepped forward and said to everyone, "For hundreds of years, sailors have told stories of such events: ghost ships, phantom seas, cursed waters. Perhaps we have strayed into one of them." Then, suddenly, the ship lurched violently. Everyone grabbed onto whatever they could find. It was as if an invisible hand had lifted the ship from below and dropped it back down. A sailor screamed from the deck, "The sea is moving. There are no waves, but the water seems to be flowing backwards." The captain rushed to the navigation room. There, James Howard was staring at the map with bewildered eyes. "Sir, we are not where we're supposed to be. The calculations don't add up. It feels like we aren't moving in any direction, just spinning in the same place." The ship seemed to be trapped in an invisible loop. That night, Margaret was writing in her cabin. She suddenly glanced out the window and saw something moving within the fog. It looked like countless shadowy figures floating on the water's surface. She shuddered and dropped her pen and paper. But when she went to call the others, there was nothing to be seen outside the window, only the endless fog. Thus, the second night passed, but a single fear gripped everyone's mind: who among them would be the next to disappear? The morning of the third day was filled with a strange silence. Standing on the ship's deck, one could only hear the gentle lapping of the sea, but there was no wind, no birds, not even the familiar creaking of the ship's metal frame. It was as if the entire world had fallen silent. Captain Lawson stood on the deck and announced, "Everyone remain calm. We are trying to get out of this spot." But the fear in the sailors' eyes was unmistakable. After the previous night's jolt, many believed the ship would sink, and since Robert's strange note, no one dared to be alone. At around 10 in the morning, a shout erupted from the deck. A sailor pointed toward the horizon. Everyone rushed to look and saw a strange shape floating in the distant fog. At first it looked like another ship, but as it drew nearer, it became clear it was an old wooden vessel, dilapidated, as if it had sunk 100 years ago and had now resurfaced. Margaret said in a breathless voice, It's a ghost ship, just like I've read about in the history books. The old ship was completely still, but strangely, the water around it had turned a dark, murky color, and the most terrifying part was that while no one was visible on its deck, it felt as though someone was watching from within. Captain Lawson raised his binoculars. He remained still for a few seconds, then slowly lowered them. His face was pale. There's no one there, only a flag is hanging. But that flag doesn't belong to any modern country. Just then, the Arcadia Voyager's engine died again. The ship came to a halt near the floating wreck. Howard, trembling with fear, said, "Sir, it feels like some invisible force is pulling us in." The sailors prepared ropes, ready to board the strange vessel and investigate. But the passengers were completely against it. The air filled with screams and cries. Right at that moment, another horrifying event occurred. A young boy about 10 years old vanished from the crowd of passengers. His mother had been holding his hand just seconds before, but when she looked down again, her son was gone. Only the small toy car that had slipped from his hand lay on the deck floor. The mother's screams shook the entire ship. She was nearly driven mad with grief. Everyone searched the deck frantically, but the boy was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. Daniel said in a grave voice, "This is no ordinary disappearance. Some power is taking our people." One by one, as night fell, the fear intensified. The passengers wanted to sleep together in the hall. No one had the courage to stay alone. The cabins were empty as everyone gathered in the dining hall. Outside, the sea was still, with no waves. Only an occasional, strange knocking sound could be heard as if someone was pushing against the ship from underneath. Margaret was writing in her notebook, but her hand was shaking. Suddenly, her pen stopped. Before her very eyes, letters began to appear on the page by themselves. She screamed in terror and threw the book down. Everyone rushed to open it. It read, "The sea will take what belongs to her. None shall return." In an instant, a dead silence fell over the hall. Everyone looked at each other in fear. Just then, the ship's lights went out. Darkness. Only the deep roar of the sea could be heard, and in that darkness, it felt like someone was walking. The sound of heavy footsteps, from one end of the deck to the other, but when the lights came back on, there was no one there. After the lights returned, everyone stared at each other. No one spoke a word. In the silence, only the sound of the passengers' rapid breathing could be heard. It was as if a stone had been placed on everyone's chest at once. Captain Lawson stood up. His voice was firm, but the unease in his eyes was clear. Everyone remained calm. "Something has happened, but we cannot give up. We have to get this ship out of here as soon as possible." Howard ran to the navigation room, but he returned and said, "Sir, the engine is dead again. The entire system is down. I can't figure it out." Hearing this news, several passengers broke down. Cries, prayers, and screams filled the air of the hall. Margaret said in a calm voice, "We need to find out something. That old ship might hold the answers. If we don't go there, we will never understand what is happening." At first, no one agreed, but eventually, a few sailors, along with Margaret, Daniel, and Lawson himself, lowered a small boat. They rowed slowly through the fog toward the abandoned ship. As soon as they boarded, a chill ran down their spines. The wood was broken, the ropes dry and frayed, but strangely, there was no algae or sea salt on the deck, as if it had been used just a few days ago. Daniel slowly walked to the center of the deck. An odd symbol was carved there, 3 wave-like marks inside a circle. "This is an ancient symbol," he whispered, "the symbol of a sea goddess. Sailors believed that if you angered her, she would swallow your ship." Margaret, while looking around, suddenly entered a cabin. Inside, on a table, were several old diaries scattered about. There was no dust on them. She picked one up. On the open page, it was written, "We cannot escape. The sea has chosen us. Last night, it took 3 more. They are whispering, calling, and I feel the pull too." Margaret quickly flicked through the pages. Every page spoke of the same fear, the same terror. On the last page were just 3 words: "She is here." Just then, the dilapidated ship shuddered. A cold wind blew from nowhere. The cabin door slammed shut on its own. From outside, Captain Lawson's voice was heard. "Get out of here quickly. Something is surrounding us." Margaret and Daniel ran outside. The fog had grown even thicker, and the sea was churning with black waves. Everyone scrambled back to their boat, but as they were returning, they clearly heard countless voices whispering from within the broken ship. "Stay, stay, stay with us." When they returned to the Arcadia Voyager, the terror had only intensified because upon their return they saw that another passenger was gone. This time, it was the mother of the little boy who had been searching for her son like a madwoman the night before. Only a wet handprint was left on her shawl. Lawson said in a defeated voice, "Our time is running out. If we don't do something, no one on this ship will survive." Howard whispered in reply, "Sir, I don't think we are operating under human rules anymore. We've entered a sea from which there is no return." And just then, a roar erupted from the depths of the ocean. The ship rocked once, and then, as if an unseen hand was pulling it, it was dragged toward the darkness. The Arcadia Voyager seemed trapped by an invisible force that had risen from the depths of the seas. There were no waves, yet the ship trembled again and again. With each lurch, the passengers screamed and clung to one another. Captain Lawson stood on the ship's bridge one last time and said, "If we just sit here, we will all be destroyed. We have to try to start the engine, no matter what." Howard nodded, but there was no hope in his eyes. "Sir, the machinery is not under anyone's control. No matter how hard I try, it feels like the engine is shutting itself off." Margaret then remembered the diary she had brought from the ghost ship. She said, "They wrote, 'The sea chooses.' Perhaps we are not meant to be here. But what if we defy it?" Daniel pointed toward the symbol and said, "No. This place is accursed territory. Those who enter here never leave. The ship we saw from centuries ago, its people vanished just like this." No sooner had he finished speaking than the lights went out again. The entire ship was plunged into darkness, and through that darkness, the whispering began to float in. "Come, come with us, the sea awaits." The passengers covered their ears. Some were crying, others praying. Lyra, the artist who had been painting all this time, suddenly stood up. Her eyes were vacant, her voice cold. "There's no point in fighting. They are calling us. We have to go." She slowly walked toward the deck. Everyone screamed for her to stop, but she didn't. It was as if an invisible force was pulling her. Just as she reached the edge of the deck, she looked back once, a strange smile on her face, and then silently disappeared into the fog. This time, the passengers' terror shattered completely. Many desperately begged the captain, "Save us," but Lawson knew there was nothing left in his hands. Margaret wrote one last time in her notebook, "If anyone ever finds this book, know that we have been lost somewhere. The sea has taken us, and we will not be coming back." Just then, a sound like a thunderclap rose from beneath the sea. The ship shook violently, as if caught in an invisible storm. The surrounding foam glowed with a strange light, and then it swallowed everything. For a brief moment, the passengers saw countless shadow figures floating around the ship as sailors, passengers, children, women, countless lost faces. They were reaching out, calling and whispering, "Join us forever." Then everything vanished. Several weeks later, other ships found the Arcadia Voyager off the coast. The sea was calm, the sky was clear, but the ship was completely empty. No passengers, no crew. Only in the captain's cabin lay a damp notebook. On the final page, only one line was written: "The sea has claimed us.